Thank you. So it's a great honor to present and nominate and introduce you today the award winner for the high prestigious Edward J. Hoffman Award. So the Edward J. Hoffman Award has been established in the memory of Professor Edward J. Hoffman, who has been a pioneer, has done amazing achievements early on in the field of PET and 3D PET and whole body PET, and also the introduction of the famous Hoffman 3D brain PET fandom. So this has a legacy, a great legacy to support. So this award recognizes nuclear medicine imaging scientists who have made outstanding contributions in the research development, lab-to-clinic translation, clinical use of nuclear medicine, instrumentation, algorithms, and computer code, as well as to the education and physicians in training and nuclear medicine scientists. So this is the highest distinction award of SNMI Physics Instrumentation Data Sciences Council. These are just a list of the previous past recipients of that award, and their names speak themselves for the distinction. So for this time, I'm going to be a little bit unorthodox. Let's pretend we don't know who the winner is, and let's just go through the list of achievements, and then in the end, I'm going to reveal the winner. So the statement is for outstanding contributions to computational nuclear medicine research, best practice, training, and education. And the photo will be revealed at the end, okay? So I want you to, let's assume we don't know the recipient, and then reconstruct their profile from the below contribution statement using the available data and testimonials, like a back projection kind of thing. So we're gonna focus on computational, on best practice, training, and education aspects of the contribution statement. First, I would like to thank Dr. Carlos Uribe, because we together co-nominated the person. And he supported a lot with all the data that I'm going to show you later. Also, all the mentees and colleagues of the award recipient for providing the testimonials and photos, as well as the SNMI and the PITS board for the opportunity, and the review committee, of course. So the academic degrees and appointments, that's kind of easy because all of them were acquired at UBC. Makes it easier to describe that. In 1999, 2001, 2005, with a PhD in physics from the University of British Columbia. Then that person moved to Johns Hopkins University as assistant professor, then moved up the ranks to associate professor, and then went to his alma mater back at UBC with an appointment as associate professor and senior scientist in 2018, and now holds a current appointment as a professor and distinguished scientist at the Department of Radiology Physics at UBC, as well as at BC Cancer Research Institute. I know the candidate and successful winner for more than 14 years. I've been fortunate to know and personally attest as an exceptional mentor, educator, scientist, and leader in nuclear medicine physics and imaging sciences. Though the achievements speak for themselves, I can unequivocally attest to their significance and the continuous inspiration that he has provided to all his mentees through his leadership, mentorship, education, and research activities throughout a vast range of fields, as we're going to show later. And I'm going to actually emphasize here the impressive range of topics that he has contributed in a transformative way. First of all, he's beginning his career as a PhD and later joining Johns Hopkins with an HRT list mode-based reconstruction algorithms with a novel event-by-event motion correction algorithm back then. Then he pursued active research also on resolution and PSF modeling. Of course, the introduction of dynamic whole body PET imaging for any axial field of view PET system, because this can also include short axial field of view systems. And here you can see the complexity that this protocol involves for short axial field of view systems, where we have to do multi-pass acquisitions over the whole body and use even population-based input functions if we want to accelerate the time. But this allows us to apply this technique even to conventional, affordable short axial field of view systems, which I think is a great thing for the democratization of the access of this technology. Of course, direct 4D parametric PET image reconstruction, which also is pivotal for this application to reduce noise effects. Also, later on, lots of key contributions into symmetry and theranostic digital twins for personalized radiopharmaceutical therapy, which is now driving the field forward. Also, several radiomics and AI research and clinical applications to address critical challenges in PET and SPECT imaging. And I want to emphasize here that this is vast broad range of topics speaks about a generalist, but that person is also a specialist and a generalist. And there is a book that he has previously recommended me to read, and I think it's a great example of how one can combine both combination of in-depth knowledge and broadness in different fields. So, regarding quantitative achievements, it has a strong and solid publication record as of October 2024, H-index of 58. A lot of publications, more than 3,000 per year, has reached now to more than 275 peer-reviewed publications and scientific meeting abstracts, numerous awards in different societies, starting with AAPM in 2016, and later on UBC Radiology, and as recognized by his service at the Society of Nuclear Medicine, and as an SNMI Failure and IEEE senior member, and has also highly been engaged in, internationally, and has more than 170 invited talks. Regarding his service to the community and leadership, he has been served as a chair of the PITSC board, also member of the IEEE and MISC, and chair of the SNMI AI Task Force and AI Dosimetry Work Group, led the best practice guidelines for AI and dosimetry, which are critical. He also was a co-founder and inspirer of the Emission Tomography Standardization Initiative, which contributes to raw data format standards and democratization of access to nuclear medicine. He has also, through this interaction, through committees and councils, I have learned from his exceptional skills in motivating and inspiring others to implement together a cause, how he has this mentality to get things done rather than just discussing without actually reaching action items. So all these are valuable things that I have been learned from him, and I try to apply also in my case. And also this is the same case with his peers and mentees. Regarding education contributions, he has been sub-chair of the SNMI Scientific Committee for 4 years and has created the newly created data science track, and also has successfully coordinated the SNMI webinar series on AI and medical imaging, which is a huge participation back in 2020. And also has supervised projects such as the NMI Tools project, which is now being used by more than 3,000 visitors per month to look at new software and AI models in nuclear medicine. Also, the YouTube channel he holds at UBC has more than 80 lectures providing democratized access to education material to anyone for free. He has co-authored a book in nuclear medicine physics, which is very popular for education purposes, and has been always encouraging people to publish tools, and he has a nice repository in the lab website with validated tools regarding also radiomics, such as the radiomics package Sera and Vice Sera. So all above research and education contributes demonstrated his commitment to the values of open, wide, and equitable dissemination of knowledge and the importance of translating technologies from conception to the bedside. As a personal experience, I joined Johns Hopkins in his lab in February 2011, and from the very beginning I understand how important as a mentor it is, but also as a colleague and collaborator. He challenged me not to be afraid to get out of my comfort zone and address bigger open problems that have a big clinical impact. He trained me also in quality control, even though that was not part of my original duties, which later was pivotal for my career as a nuclear medicine physicist. He's been highly motivating, supportive throughout the career, and an example is dynamic whole body PET imaging was introduced together, and in just a few months we were able to produce the first clinical data with this protocol. And his persistent support, trust, and positivity has secured space to grow anyone as a scientist. Not just me, but many of his mentees had the same experience and testimonies. So he's a lifelong devoted mentor, and he's a role model by example. He never stopped advising me on research mentorship and career development, and I have witnessed the benefits of his mentorship as well as others. Another thing I would like to say is his example that always keep reminding me that it's not just about significance and novelty, it's also about adaptability and clinical impact. So this was an anecdotal story for dynamic whole body PET imaging where we chose not to patent it as a concept, but instead work with the industry to translate this technology as fast as possible to the clinic. And now Siemens, GE, and United Imaging offer this as an automated whole body path-like reconstruction tool, both in their short axial field of view and long axial field of view PET systems. Of course, with total body PET, this field has exploded, but still the ground was prepared early on with his innovation and vision. These are a few of the testimonials. That was a large set of testimonials. I'm not going to go through those, but you can see here all the recognition and appreciation he has received from his mentees, which is the greatest testament for his contribution to the field. So this is what And in first iteration of the back projection could be about that person. If we deblur it with ChatGPT, we may can see a little better what it is, but let's try to fake it a bit. Use the generative adversarial approach. Oh, who is this? Not really, I do not recognize the person. Maybe the digital twin of the person? Well, let's ask a large language model and utilize all the data that we have presented so far. Professor Arman, Rahmim, congratulations.
Thank you very much for this great honor. Thank you, Nicolas, for the introduction, to Carlos and yourself for nominating me to the awards committee and to everybody in attendance here today. I have a bit of a disclosure here. This is going to be a very personal story. I have lived about a third of my life in each of these three countries. And I was born and raised up until my, give or take, a third of my life, up until my teenage years in my beautiful country, Iran. Of course, these are very difficult days right now, given the foreign attack and invasion of our country. And many people, including this meeting that I talked to, are going through a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty as we speak. I moved to Canada, Vancouver, to pursue my studies. I did all my degrees, as Nicolas mentioned, and then moved to the US, to Baltimore, Maryland, to be at Johns Hopkins, and then returned to Vancouver about 7 years ago. I want to share with you 3 of my formative early experiences. First, I entered the university at the age of 17 in 1996, and I had this deep thirst for knowledge, and I was there to be transformed. And within a few months, I was totally disillusioned with the university. You know, the term liberal art colleges, that term indicates that you want the education or the arts or the sciences to liberate you, liberal arts, liberate you. I felt that I'm definitely not being liberated. And so I had this disillusionment with the university, and it sort of made me really think about certain things. My observation number 2 or experience was that since the very beginning, including at the university, I had a deep admiration for multidimensional people. I remember that we were being told back then that in order to be seen, you have to stand tall, which was a sort of implied that you have to be focused on one little thing and actually be sort of unidimensional. And I felt something is wrong with that. That didn't make sense to me. Since then, there's been publications and evidence that that's actually not true, but I felt it from the very beginning. This is a book, a very famous book published in the 60s by Herbert Marcuse on the one-dimensional man, and it talks about how the industrial world tends to create one-dimensional people. But I really felt, and I believe more and more evidence is showing this, that in order to stand tall, you actually have to stand wide. This was an intuition that I have. And now, for me, that doesn't really mean, let's do a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, just have everything. No, for me, what it really means is that wherever you are at any moment, you give it all. Whatever is in front of you, right in front of you, whether you're having a conversation with your beloved family member or with your trainee, or you're doing this project, whatever is in front of you, you have to give it all. And that's a recipe for being multidimensional. Last night was Game 7 of the finals of the NBA championships, and this guy, known as SGA, a Canadian, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, led their team to the championship. I was listening to him a month and a half ago, where he had been chosen as the MVP of the entire season, and he said something that really says it all. And he said, I don't think there is enough emphasis on how much off the court, off the basketball court, influences on the court. And once I became better off the court, my career started to skyrocket. It's no coincidence. My third observation was when I was starting university, and I was looking at some people who had reached tenure, and the rest of us pursuing the tenure utopia, I noticed that you basically start to work in a certain way to reach this place where you can't be fired. But once you're there, you are possibly a very, very strange person that you wouldn't have liked to see 20 years before that. And I was seeing certain people, agitated, restless, and sort of impatient. I was like, what's going on here? So that was also a sort of a very early experience. So the title of my talk is Science as Being. There's a very good book by Eric Fromm. It's called To Have or To Be. And he talks about different mentalities on doing work, life. You could say science is a mentality to have, meaning to accumulate whatever it is, wealth or knowledge, information, or is it a mentality of being a certain way and becoming a certain way? But I don't quite mean this. To explain that a little bit more, I want to share with you two of my favorite thinkers of being, one from the West and one from the East. One is the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, and one is the Andalusian Muslim mystic Ibn Arabi. And the two of them, even though much separated by time and space, they have this beautiful dance with each other, and they talk to each other, and I explore that in my thinking. I've sort of published and written about how they talk to each other, whether it's about being open, what does openness mean, what does it mean for things to be entangled with each other, even about AI and what it does and what we think it's doing. So to explain that a little bit more, this saying by Wittgenstein is a good one. Not how the world is, but that it is the mystical. And just that sense of wonder is, of course, important. The fundamental question of ontology that the two of these favorite thinkers of mine raise is the following. Why is there something rather than nothing? We're not going to answer that today. And what does it mean for something to be? And more pointedly, what does it mean for something to be? What does it mean for you or a thing to be? And the claim that they make is that we have forgotten this fundamental question. We take being for granted without investigating its meaning. And so I want to talk about science as being certain ways, being futural. In a number of languages, not in the English language, but a number of languages, the word future means that which is arriving, right? That which is arriving. And being futural really means being receptive and open to that which is coming towards you. And so having imagination in science and receptivity and openness and not being constrained with self-definitions of who you are, I have found to be very, very important. Science is being in the trenches, being entangled with what you're doing and engaging and dancing with it. So Nicolas mentioned, in my early career, I sort of went into the trenches, into understanding how to do list mode image reconstruction, how to do, for example, motion correction with all the corrections involved. Here's another one on resolution modeling, or what is known as PSF modeling. I remember when I went to Hopkins, I spent months and months in the scanner room deciphering the GE scanner raw data with some help from GE engineers and sort of developing my own image reconstruction because I wanted to do this. I was wondering, why is it that you don't model these things in the recon? Why is this a limitation and you cannot model for resolution degradation? I went to this seminar in some GE headquarters, and I noticed people were kind of impressed by the work I was presenting. They weren't saying much, but they were impressed. And so a couple of months after that, HD PET by Siemens came out, and high definition PET, and then a couple of years after that, Sharp IR came out. And when these things started to come out, this sort of saying by Yogi Berra really stood out. In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. PSF modeling seemed to be this amazing thing, but then once you started doing it, some subtleties and strange things happened. For example, having edge artifacts, edge overshoots, and you could even see it in some of the images that were formed, for example, in brain imaging, and trying to understand what these artifacts really meant. And so I remember where are you, Adam? I don't know where you see. So with Adam, my friend here, we did this debate. We could have taken either side. I said, you take this side. He said, I'll take this side. We sort of were engaging and talking about this. Later, I organized an event in this very meeting, this PITS Council, with Ginny and Vesna and Ben Choi. And we were discussing these, and it was just such a fascinating set of discussions. After that, I ended up writing this paper with Ginny and Vesna. It's a highly cited paper. I believe I had a breakthrough in this review paper. That's why I tell people, write a really good review paper in your early career. I believe there was a breakthrough in this paper, and we saw things we had never seen before, and it opened up new lines of research, such as and opened up new lines of research in my own lab, noise propagation and resolution modeling and things of the sort. So to me, when you are in the trenches and you're present, inspiration and good things come. I love this saying by William Faulkner. He says, I only write when I am inspired. Fortunately, I'm inspired 9 o'clock every morning. And so the point is, you sit down, you show up, and good things will happen. And I love this saying also, this poem by the Persian poem by Hafiz of Shiraz, though you will not reach the beloved by trying, O heart, try as much as you possibly can. You give it all, you don't know what's going to come out of it. So in my thinking, if you know what exactly you will be doing 10 years from now, you're not doing anything right now. You shouldn't know what you will be doing 10 years from now. You should be knowing what you're doing right now. And once you're in the trenches, great things, hopefully, and inspirations will come to you. Science as being in a dance. The first grant that I got from Siemens, I found the fortune to work with Jing, and we started working together on interesting problems. She came across this article with Guabo, who's now a dear friend of mine, and it was the first time I saw 4D image reconstruction. We were excited by it. And me and Jing were dancing with each other and with this manuscript, and she ended up deriving, and I remember the sweet taste of this derivation that came out, the direct 4D EM algorithm that we derived. And it was exciting. We published that. Later, I realized last year, a couple of other people had actually derived it before that. So we had Harry Sumpes a year before it, and Julian Matthews, who had derived it a few years ago, the direct 4D EM algorithm. There was another component, but that, by the way, the 4D EM algorithm, later, Guabo took the 4D EM and made a nested version out of it, and that is now a part of Siemens. So this dance that we've been having. And also there was an effort to do, make some usage of MRI in the PET image reconstruction. As I kept looking at this problem, I feel like we need to use more and more subtle information from MRI, so subtle MRI guidance. So a couple of great trainees in our lab, visitors. Yong Yuan was a visitor, and then Yansun was a PhD student who did great work with us. Yansun is now in Guabo's lab. Science as being in admiration. I can tell you that with almost no exception, when I'm talking with you, I'm taking notes mentally. I'm looking at your strengths and I'm admiring it. And this, I love this story by Alexander where he's visiting. This picture is sort of showing it. You don't see my mouse, right? So let's see. Let me turn the laser point.
Just slide to the right. You have to slide to the right.
Oh, it actually worked out. So Alexander's visiting this ascetic philosopher, Diogenes. I think, Nicolas, you used to live close to where he was, right? And so Diogenes is sitting there, and then Alexander comes and he says, tell me anything. I would like to do something for you. Ask me anything, and I will do it for you. And then Diogenes says, yes, I do have a request for you. He says, what is it? He says, you're kind of blocking the sun. Could you please just move to the side so the sun comes through? So stand a little out of my sun. I sometimes see my role as standing out of people's sun, and standing out of the sun that they're shining, getting out of the way. And when I see great things and great abilities in people, I just admire. I step aside, and I hope to be able to support them and give the resources that I can for their success. An example of that, of course, was Nicolas, who was the first postdoc in our lab, and he pioneered this field of dynamic whole body imaging. In 6 years after he published this paper, we were already reviewing this field since it's taken a life of its own. It's a part of Siemens cameras, and we had tremendous support from Siemens in this effort. And as he also mentioned, now GE is doing this, and also United Imaging. I started looking into radiomics around 2015. I believe these couple of publications are some of the earliest applications of radiomics, comprehensive radiomics to SPECT imaging. In our lab, we had Saeed, where are you, Saeed? Over there, and Saeed, who ended up creating the SARA software, Standards Environment for Radiomics Analysis, took a life of its own. His PhD thesis is highly cited because of this, and we became part of this image biomarker standardization initiative. Mohammed in our lab, a student, and then now later postdoc, he took this to the next level and created a visualized SARA, so he's creating workflows that are shareable, contributing to reproducible radiomics. And this is being rebranded now as Radioma, and we hope to release it soon. Lee Jun, who was a visiting exchange student in our lab, now is a professor in Southern Medical University, great friend of mine, and he and later Wenbing, they visited our lab. Wenbing developed the concept of fusion radiomics or multi-level, multi-modality radiomics. This got me to think, why don't we do tensor radiomics, which is a systematic incorporation of multi-flavored radiomics? Why don't we do a little bit more of looking at multiple flavors of each radiomic features and systematically incorporate them, and this sort of became a thing of its own in multiple future applications. AI or deep learning based applications to PET CT. Here's an example of a fantastic member of our lab, Ferishte, who has been my right-hand person in many things, including in grant writing and just interviewing new candidates, doing great things for our lab. This is something that she published, TMTVNet, which is being very popular. We share both the code and the model publicly. People are, I believe, benefiting from this. And so this was, for example, for lymphoma. Yvonne sort of took us to the space of PSMA, PET imaging, and automation using AI for segmentation of healthy organs and also for tumors. And Amir Hossein took us to the space of using state-of-the-art 2D AI detection algorithms and apply them to 3D using this sort of important thing that he convinced me works really well, and that is multi-angle maximum intensity projections followed by application of state-of-the-art 2D. And multiple other people in our lab, Shadab and Obe, doing great stuff on weak supervision and quantitation following deep segmentation. A force of nature that I worked with is Isaac. He was originally going to join our lab, but because of some administrative complications, he ended up joining the laboratory of my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Habib Zaidi. He had some very interesting publications on radiomics and on radiogenomics that you can see here. But what I really want to talk about today about his work is when he managed to do, for the first time to my knowledge, map a non-attenuation corrected PET image to an attenuation-corrected PET image without intervening CT generation. So this was a particular approach. It was very hard to believe this works at the time. So this approach of AI-guided CT-less PET image generation. Other people were also doing some intermediate CT or transmission generation. I remember I was at a conference presenting his work because he couldn't, he had some visa limitations, we changed the title of the abstract because not only for brain, but for whole body, suddenly he was showing this thing works. And it was shocking, and I remember that day stood out as everybody being surprised. And time has shown that this really does work. And so now I was visiting the booth of United Imaging a couple of years ago in EANM, talking to my friend Yehuan. And so Yehuan was telling me that actually United Imaging, they are using this approach of CT-less PET image generation using their own implementation applied to movement of the brain or body, where because the PET part is moving and the CT, of course, is not, you're kind of creating those images without CT guidance. Another thing that he created was recognizing that even when you have CT, this can really help. So you could actually detect mismatches. So when you have mismatches between PET and CT, and or even MRI, you could have things like motion artifacts, truncation, halo, metal, and this technique allows you to detect those issues when there's bad registration between CT and PET. So here's an example of photopenic images generated, low uptake PET images generated because the extremities of the body are not matched between the PET and the CT. And this technique can detect that and disentangle those. I wish industry would pursue this. I've tried to approach industry to tell them, you got to try this. This is a fantastic quality assurance technique, and I hope it happens. I was invited by Dr. Richwall and John Sunderland with great assistance with Bonnie and with Ronald as a co-chair to create this AI task force. In 2020, when the field was can I take a water here? Sorry. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I missed that. When AI was taking the field as a tsunami and sort of figuring this out, I remember in 2022, the first AI summit happened. This was the first meeting many of us were attending after COVID. We hadn't seen each other for a long time. Look at our faces. We were so happy. We looked tired and happy and all good stuff happening. So this says it all. I remember once I was walking with these four beautiful people, Abhinav, Joita, Tyler, and Chi, and I was talking to myself. It was either this meeting or another meeting. I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy to be with them. These are my friends. These are my brothers and sisters. We're doing this together. And so that was a great coalition that was created, expanded later over time, and now Abhinav and Tyler are at the helm and taking the AI task force to the next level. We came up with this paradigm of going from patient to image and from image to patient. And we anticipated rightly that AI will enter all of these steps, going from the patient to image and back to the image, back from the image to the decision making for the patient, and it has. And so we were trying to anticipate what that means. And I worked with Babak and with Dr. Elliot Siegel to host these two special AI issues with many people in this audience contributing to it, some remarkable articles, highly cited works that were written at that time anticipating the future. I want to spell out one of them. Arek, which I don't think is here, a friend of mine, he wrote this article, and he managed somehow to get people from industry. You'll recognize some of these names from industry, all of them in the same virtual room and writing this article, and they put out this vision that we need to standardize raw data for scanners. Well, we have DICOM for images. Why don't we have a similar thing for raw data? And so they put it out there, and then it just hit me that this really has to happen. And then a very strange set of 1 month or 2 months happened. Everybody I spoke with, and I said, let's do this, would say yes to me. And so for me, that 1 or 2 months was science as being a trustee. I knew very, very well, and this was a spiritual experience for me. When we were all gathering, 50 people, whatever, in that room, everybody was saying yes to me. I knew that I'm being trusted at this very moment to lead this, and I knew that very soon after this, I will get out of the way, and these people will be leading. And surely they did, and the ETSI initiative was born, the Emission Tomography Standards Initiative. These 5 amazing people, Glenn, Chris, Adam, Michael, and Nicolas, have been leading it. Amazing number of people. I wish I had more pictures to show you. Great efforts are happening, and they are leading it. And I knew that this is not my doing. I'm just being trusted to help make this happen, and it has taken a life of its own. Number of great efforts that came out of it. This one by Babak on trustworthy AI ecosystems. We had one by Tyler here on best practices for algorithm development, influential publications. This one by Abhinav and team. It's not by single person. Nothing is by single person. By team, Abhinav and team, Babak and team, and Tyler and team. With best practices for evaluation reliance guidelines, that's now actually, if you submit something to J&M, you actually have to go through this and think about the reliance guidelines. Multiple other publications that came out of it, great discussions, fantastic debates that took place. There's also the AI dosimetry working group that I've had the pleasure of and the honor of being the chair for since 2022. Great discussions, great visionary thinking, and also spelling out all the tools that exist and need to exist on computational nuclear oncology and what that can do for us, on theranostic digital twins and what that can do to us, on standardization of terminology, etc. I want to invite all of you tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. There is this great session. We're going to have 4 talks by Taher, Lydia, Nuran, and Jonglain, and also a debate on whether digital twins are science fiction or a reality. 2:30 tomorrow, Tuesday. Come to that, both talks and debate. In our own lab, working closely with Carlos and him leading, we've had multiple people do fantastic efforts, right? So we've got Sinchi here in this publication. She worked on single time point dosimetry. A really beautiful publication in J&M that happened at the time. Julia, are you here? No. And she also did multiple, she said she couldn't attend. She did multiple efforts. Single time point was one of them. Cassandra working on cellular level dosimetry. Other people, Helena and Sarah's in the audience, working on preclinical evaluation of theranostic agents and creating this software called PyTheranostics. Now with Pedro also on our team, great things are happening. Here, my primary role is being proud of being the photographer of this picture and just capturing that beautiful moment of these 4 people having a great time and working together. Another force of nature in our group, Luke, who also is in the audience. Are you there? Did you just run away? Oh. Okay, I'm going to skip him. So, no. He has created this pi tomography software, which has taken a life of its own. Amazing contribution. Now in our lab, when we publish, and I want to encourage you too, when you publish new things, you could also add this to this software and others can benefit from it. Recently, for example, he enabled uncertainty estimation. When we reconstruct, why are we not also estimating not just the counts, but the uncertainty in the counts? And that should be done, and this is an example of a publication. Obed worked closely with Luke to put this on 3D slicers, so now you could also use this as an extension on a 3D slicer to do spec reconstruction. Other fantastic people in our group working on digital twins. Majid, who now has his own laboratory in Iran and doing a lot of work in this space. Ali, James, Maziar, and Hami doing work on creating PBPK models and digital twins. This is an example of a publication that Ali put out there. This model is publicly shared. Physiologically, it's a pharmacokinetic model that allows us to study so many interesting things. And so it's an example of computational models allowing us to understand so much and personalize so much. This is my friend Dan Katermas, who's in the audience. And one day I was walking, and I didn't particularly feel like something's missing in our lab, but I was just walking. And I was like, what? Maybe something missing that I'm not even aware of. And it hit me that we're getting away from our experimental core in our lab. The inspiration came to me, you got to do something about that. I picked up the phone, I called Dan, I said, hey Dan, I feel like we need to do more experimentation in our lab. He said, Arman, I have this phantom, as you know. We now call this a probe IQ phantom. He developed years developing this. He said, would you like to have this phantom? And so he was so generous, he gave us the phantom, and this phantom took a life of its own. We've had multiple works led by Roberto, and now here's an example of James and Chen Guang, who we call Brother Lee, and then they're working together, doing great things. And capstone projects, people building fluidic system to create dynamic imaging, for example, on this, 3D printing to add organs. Here's a publication by Roberto that's going to come out hopefully soon in Nature Communications, where he's mastered this technique of negative cast modeling for basically creating lesions and organs, radioactive lesions and organs that he's placing in different kinds of phantoms and getting very, very realistic images, allowing us to study very interesting things. Ivan took us to the startup world, and he said, Arman, I really want to do this. We have this great software, Asinta. Why don't we do it? And he did, and we agreed. Me and Carlos really worked with him, and we're now so proud that he's doing this. Primary reasons we did this was, I'm a sort of a risk-averse person. I wanted to be able to push myself and to take a risk. I also wanted to learn how to do this so that other people in our lab who in the future may want to enter the entrepreneurial space can also have some examples to learn from, and I can give them some advice. So good things are happening here. For science as being in touch, I think generosity in teaching, sharing, inclusivity is what it's all about, being in touch with each other. And this, being generous as a teacher, as a mentor, has value in itself. Early years in my career, sometimes some people were telling me, Arman, don't even go to conferences. People may scoop your ideas if you present it too early. That never made any sense to me. And for me, a person who does not share is closed off. And in my faith, that's referred to as having a narrow life. In itself, it's bad not to be generous because you get closed off and distanced from reality and from the rest of the existence and being. So in COVID era, there's a great opportunity. Me and Carlos were teaching a course. We said, why don't we pull all these lectures online? So 49 lectures ended up being put on our YouTube channel, has taken a life of its own. Many people throughout the world also are looking at this. We've offered this even as a course to people in developing countries. And then we started interviewing people, whether one-on-one interviews or inviting people to give us lectures has taken a life of its own. Also some advice, career advice. For example, recently I posted this thing on growth and success in academia and a follow-up lecture to that. Sharing of software, Nicolas referred to that, a lot of software coming from our lab, from the brilliant people in our lab that we like to share with the rest of the world. Science is being heart to heart. So as I like to say a lot, there is nothing, zero, zilch, zip, nada, nothing that replaces direct receptive interaction with another human being. I love this picture by Rumi and the mystic and Sufi Rumi, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and his teacher Shams of Tabriz. And I love it because look at their knees are touching, and look at how humble Rumi is to his teacher Shams. But even more remarkably, look at how even more humble his teacher is to his student. And if you look at the poetry, the Persian poetry of Rumi, sometimes he's talking about his students, but you get confused because you think he's talking about his teacher. Same for Shams. When you listen to Shams talking about Rumi, you sometimes think he's talking about his teacher, that he's giving so much respect and honor to this person. Science is being in pain. Difficult situations, difficult people going to dark places, which especially happens when you're writing grants. And just going through that, people have asked me, you talk about exponential growth, but what about failures? I said, no, that's a part of it. Like when setbacks happen and difficult things happen, and you're dealing with it the way you're supposed to be dealing with it, great things are happening to you and for you without you even knowing about it. And so I can talk about science as being in growth because ultimately the human being is this wonderful being that can grow every day. We always overestimate, some people call this Gates' law, we always overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. So exponential growth is actually, some people say, it's very hard for the human mind to believe or fathom or appreciate. And I believe that too. It's very hard to understand exponential growth. And remarkably, you could be in this phase right now, and you're very flat compared to later times. And you're very flat compared to some other people that might be outgrowing you. But if you're doing the right things, then exponential growth is happening. Just give you an example. Imagine 4% growth every month for 10 years of your career, whether it's growth in character, growth in your science, in the work that you do. If you grow 4% every month compared to your first month, well, that ends up being, after 10 years, a 500% growth. But if you grow every month compared to the last month, right, that's exponential growth. And that could give you an 11,000% growth 10 years from now. And these are numbers that actually make sense. And they don't make sense because it's so hard to fathom it. Science as being grateful, as I wrap up my talk, I'm grateful to these 5 individuals. Tom T.G. gave me an opportunity to start my master's degree. I was having terrible grades in my 4th year of undergrad, senioritis, loss of motivation, and he saw something in me and he gave me an opportunity. Vesna took me in her lab and she brought me to the world of medical imaging. It was a great supervisor. Dr. Dean Wong, Dr. Richard Wall, they recruited me to Hopkins. They were very, very kind to me and did many good things with me and to me. Francois Bernard recruited me to BC Cancer 7 years ago. Science is being with. Every single person that I name here is not just someone on my list of co-authors is actually quite bigger than this. These are people that have touched me, that I find myself as having been with. And it's possible there are more people, and I'm sorry that you might not be here, but you are also one of these people that I have forgotten about. I want to make 2 notable mentions, my 2 brothers in crime, Babak and Carlos. So Babak is a visionary of the first kind, cuts through the noise, sees things very differently. I've learned a lot about him. And what I love about this relationship is that we complete each other's sentences. It's a very, very special feeling. Carlos, when I moved to UBC, after a couple of interactions with him, I told to myself, the Rahmim lab shall be no more. It's going to be our lab. And it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made, and we have grown this together. Just capturing some beautiful moments that I've had with many great, great people around me. And there's many more that I just can't share here. Our amazing trainees, the brilliant minds and hearts that we have seen in all these years working with us, doing and leading the science. The grants that, of course, have come towards us and have supported us. Being from my father, my dad, used to come with me in a number of conferences. This is an example of him with me in Europe, in front of a cathedral. This is an IEEE meeting. Sometimes I would tell him, Dad, you can sit at the back row, and he would come and sit at the front row, and he would come and shake my hands as I was walking up the thing. He was so proud of me, and he wanted me to succeed. And 2 years ago, he passed away at the very end of this meeting in Chicago. When I was struggling at many times with grants, with things, I would tell him, please pray for me. And even today, when I have a lab member or a friend and they're struggling, I sometimes tell them, have you been talking to your parents recently? If you're having difficult situations in life, have you been talking to your mom and dad recently? My mom here, who, no matter what accomplishments I have, I'm no more than a son to her. And no less. And that's all that matters for me. And my brother here, if anyone wants to harm me, they have to go through him. So that's really wonderful. My daughter, Olia, who my family's in the audience, my mom unfortunately was going to be here, but she got sick 4 days ago, so we had to cancel her flight. My daughter, Olia, is very loving to me. She has taught me that God has created the human being free, and if a parent doesn't get that, he shall be defeated. And this face really says it all. And then my son, Mateen, who is my teacher and embodiment of care and concern in my life. My wife, Zahra, who has been my wife and companion of more than 20 years and has been in this journey with me and the ups and downs and has made me the center of her life. And I couldn't have asked for a better, wonderful companion in my life. I want to go back to this slide that I showed you. For me, and I'm going to wrap up. For me, at the end of the day, it's about something that my faith teaches me. And my faith teaches me there is no mission more sublime but to perfect human character. That's the biggest mission that we're on. And for me, the best way to do that is to admire, is to praise other people. This summarizes how I feel about this. Praise, and you will be praised. Admire, and you will be admired. Step aside for others, and you will be lifted. I want to go back to my dad. Shortly before he died, I was talking to him, and I was talking about my successes, and he turned to me, and he suddenly changed his tone. And this is the last poem that I remember from him. He said, and I read this in Persian, به تخت صدارت نشستن چه حاصل خوش آن کس که بر تخت دلها نشیند. This is the last poem I remember from him. What gain is there to ascend to the seat of power? Blessed is the one who ascends to the seat of hearts. From disillusionment to now, in this 30 years of my entering the university to now, if I can summarize in one sentence what I have found and how I have solved my disillusionment is this. Science is what a scientist does, not so much the other way around. Scientist is the one who defines science. And science is this strange illumination and this ecosystem that the scientist, the human being scientist, creates around himself and herself. Going back to the fundamental question of ontology, what is the relation of being to beings? What does it mean for something to be? I can say that the human being is utterly open, futural, entangled, engaged, and in a dance. It awaits new openings, paradigms, epochs, new unconcealments of being. The meaning of being is what it manifests in the human being. That's where it shows itself the most. Heidegger says only if science exists, having absorbed the fundamental question, can it advance further in its essential task, which is not to amass and classify bits of knowledge, but to disclose truth in ever-renewed fashion. In a nutshell, that truth and that science, which is entirely unpredictable in its authentic form, is what the human being, is ultimately what the human being brings out. Therefore, science as being, and thank you very much for your attention.